So the approach that I took, purely by chance and kind of blind faith, with the status project, was just to look at the links between two things. So it sounds a bit obvious. What's the relationship between me and you? Is it we sat together at a presentation, co-presenters, yeah? Now, that's not quite right, is it? So the relationship between me and you, myself and yourself, is embodied by us. There's nothing else. We are the perfect definition of that relationship. And so that's all I've done with the status map. And because you can read that relationship, and people tend to read the relationship between two things in many different ways, each map is unique to the reader.
Yeah.
What was your question?
My question was about the relationality, but I think you.
Oh, relations, yeah. So
yeah,
I used that word a bit,
yeah.
didn't I? Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
I'm also kind of intrigued to pick out, because you're very firm that they're maps, and they've got a kind of coordinate system, and I wondered why you chose to have a kind of the coordinates. So.
What, the grid?
Yeah.
Well, of course, when you start off not knowing about anything, you emulate, you copy something, you parody it. So that's how I started, and it's actually many of the things I started with have fallen off because they, as you learn more, you realise that's just not useful. It's antagonistic towards the work, or it's just it just falls off. But the grids, I think the grid is useful. I like the index. Like as I produced this book. And I like the maps, and they're kind of nice. But my favourite thing, this whole book is produced by a computer program as well, I should say. None of these maps are laid out by hand; they're all programs. My thing that I'm most proud of is the index. So this is index for every item in the book, and it's one computer program that produced that. And I think that I don't know whether it's useful, but it's something that I find pleasing to consider that. The program produced all of that. You just press the button, and so that takes a lot of craft to get it right.
Yes. Did you write the computer program yourself?
Yeah.
So how did you gain that kind of knowledge? Because it seems to be there's a whole sort of set of knowledges that you seem to go through acquiring as you make your work. Be that how to navigate a canoe and pilot the River Avon, or be that how to write enough computer code to get yourself to produce an index.
Yeah.
How did you? I'm interested in, because what it seems to me is that a lot of these mappings of systems are mappings of subjectivity. So what you I don't know if have you got any versions of these pages you can put up on there for you to see?
What are you particularly interested in?
Well, at the bottom of each of these pages, I don't know I haven't seen the big map, but at the bottom of each of these pages it says things like becoming in possession of a national insurance number. And what you're saying about synthetic bodies and that difference between being a human and having an identity. And it was when you were talking about how you could, once you had an identity, you could have human rights, and how you could give human rights to a robot by giving them a particular set of these characteristics. And this notion of, there's a sort of sense of the subject and the person evolving and becoming through these different mapped characteristics. And I'm interested if you could kind of talk through some of where these came from and why you decided to put them together.
All right, well, it's a nice little story that might answer that question a little bit. So as I touched on earlier, I sometimes get in trouble with authority. And specifically with this project, actually this project hasn't got me into any trouble at all, which is quite interesting, making new identities and selling them. You would imagine there'd be something going on there. But other projects, for instance, the border crossing project, has got me into more trouble. That was a guide on how to cross national boundaries without paperwork. And I think that has created some problems for me. Specifically one as being classified as a threat to national security now, and also for a while treated as a terrorist. And so this map here is how you become a terrorist. And then
is this your own personal experience of getting to the point where you were branded as a terrorist?
Yeah, well, as a individual in the UK system, we all have the same rights, which is surprising, isn't it? So we all have the same rights and responsibilities regarding terrorism. Anyway, I became classified as a terrorist, and my suspicion was that to become unclassified as a terrorism, I had to somehow become a commercial terrorist, because that's generally how things are defined as legal in this country. So one thing I did, I needed financial support for this investigation, and I managed to secure that. And then I made this map, and I'll just show you briefly. I did have one of these maps, but I gave it away. This is the kind of whole thing about being a terrorist. You've got all these kind of memberships. This is all different memberships of prescribed terrorist organisations. It hasn't got irrational org on there, but who knows. And then there's kind of no man's land here. And then this is all merchandise. This is all terrorist merchandise, from buying a T-shirt from Hamas, and all sorts of other things like flags. And the high street is all mixed up, so you can buy this merchandise online, on Amazon and all that kind of stuff. So it's perfectly legal to buy the Anarchist Cookbook. You can buy that. You can also get it from your library. I ordered it from the Bristol Library. But of course, as soon as they hand it to you, you're now breaking the law, because you're in possession of items that could be used for blah blah terrorist act. So, it's perfectly legal to sell those things, but it's illegal to possess them. So of course the thing that makes that so is because the money has changed hands. Here you see merchandise here, closer to no man's land. It's kind of here. This is terrorist merchandise from the former troubles in Northern Ireland. So that's kind of now no longer so difficult to deal with. It's actually something that can be now, there'll probably be an interpretation centre in Belfast sooner or later. Someone's going to realise they can get lottery money, and let's kind of, anyway, then another kind of route from not being a terrorist from being a terrorist to not being a terrorist is actually to go to prison. I opted not to do that though. So I entered the market with this map, and the case was dropped against me.
Are you now able to travel freely? Because there's all sorts of there's also stories about you being kind of stopped and detained at borders, and is it the Eurostar who won't let you travel without copying your phone records?
Well, I don't carry a mobile phone generally anymore. I was advised not to do that. I was stopped every time I entered or left the United Kingdom for a period of 18 months. So about every 2 weeks I was interrogated by a special branch. But that's no longer the case now. We've made up.
Okay.
And I think the reason that happened was because not only did I enter the market, but I also produced these maps, signed them, and sent them to the police officers in question. Right. And they were very flattered, and they have them on the police station wall now.
Right. Interesting. Can you talk us through a bit about the border crossing project? Because it seemed to me that that was doing something very interesting in terms of inscribing those territories. So making, on the one hand, challenging them, but making them very visible. So there's a wonderful thing about maps, obviously making things visual, making you able to see territories and boundaries. And here you were crossing those boundaries, sometimes in clandestine manners, or almost always in clandestine manners.
Well, not always. I was very interested in the mythology of the European Union, because we're supposed to be able to travel freely, supposed to be able to go and reside all over the European Union, work where we want. And I know from my personal experience that you can't just go to Germany and settle and get a job. It's very, very, very difficult. The authorities make it very hard for you. But also, there are many people in Europe that actually are resident in the European Union but aren't allowed to travel from country to country. And then there are other minorities, for instance, Romani people, or football supporters, or some kind of activists who regularly have their rights of free movement removed. So yeah, it would have been very easy to say, let's cross the Polish Russian border. Are they adjacent? Well, anyway, some romantic Cold War border with dogs and guns.